Hi, this is Sean Murphy. I'll be moderating this session. My firm is SK Murphy, Inc. We're fortunate today to have Angel Rampy of Success Through Learning with us, who will share some insights on how to develop and use influence in your consulting. Angel specializes in coaching and training professionals in the United States. She brings a local and an international perspective to her coaching and training services. She's worked with many global organizations and professionals in Silicon Valley. Her interpersonal and analytical skills and her results-oriented approach make Angel a trusted advisor for people and companies. Unlike many coaches, Angel has expertise in a variety of coaching methods. This gives her a versatility to provide the right coaching approach and training for the person and situation. We are recording this, but as we've done with other highly interactive sessions, we're only going to post snippets of Angel presenting. You're welcome to unmute and ask questions directly during the briefing. If you're not in a place where you can talk, then please type them into the chat and I will ask them of Angel. Angel, turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Sean and Teresa, for inviting me to this wonderful group. I've heard so much about PATCA through Teresa. Teresa and I have worked together with women in consulting. So thank you very much for inviting me. So just a bit of background about me too. I worked in technology for many years, and I hate to say it, about 20 years, and it really aged me. And I started out in human resources. And when I started out in human resources, I was supporting the technical folks. And I remember one day a gentleman came in and he was telling me he was having problems with his mail. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, my name is John Smith, and there's another John Smith that works in the company. And I said, and so what's the problem? He says, do you have a board? I said, yeah, here's a board. And he says, do you have some chalk here? Because, at that time. And I said, yes, sure. And so he decides to graph out how John Smith is in building 1 and John Smith in building 2, and how the mail is his getting his mail and they're getting his mail, but he had to draw it out. And I thought to myself, wow, all I could say is, can you fix a problem between my mail and get this other John Smith to get his own mail and I get my own mail? But he had to draw it out and he had to show me what the problem was. I was very impressed with this way of thinking. And ever since then, I always wanted to learn more about how technical people think. And one of the things that always happened, and when you're in human resources, they always ask you at a certain point, hey, do you want to support sales and marketing or whatever? And I always say, no, leave me with the techie guys, because I get them. I'm curious about them. I understand them. They're fast learners, and they have a unique way of thinking. So I've always hanged out, even though if I'm not technical myself, supporting technical people. Needless to say, when I started managing folks, most of the organizations that I was supporting in learning and development were technical folks, hardware, software, manufacturing, most of that. And so when I went off on my own to launch my own business, I said, this is an area where I want to continue supporting technical people and coaching them to be successful in their work and also becoming leaders. So I know most of you are consultants, and I want to make sure that I bring in some consulting stories as well into this conversation. And one of the things that I will ask you is, as Sean had mentioned, is to please, I want this to be engaging. So let's make it a 2-way, not a 1-way. And if you have any questions, I will pause every now and then to ask if you have any questions. So one of the things when I started working with doing learning and development for technical people that came out was influence skills. And as much as this is said, influence for technical minded professionals, I wonder how many of you in the room are actually technical. So if you could just, raise up hands, or you could do it through just being able to say, okay, all right. So there's quite a number of you here that I would say consider themselves technical, right? Okay. So here's what's interesting. When I started coaching, I actually thought that I would be attracting people like engineers, to start coaching them. But I had a big aha moment. And when I think about the term technical, and if you Google the word technical, here's what comes up. It's a person with a technical mind breaks things down into pieces. Remember the guy, John Smith, who broke down through the board and to the pieces, right, of his issue that are digestible and works through them in an orderly process. As this person gains experience, he or she has the ability to see the logic and mentally visualize areas where problems are more likely to develop. Now, here's the thing. What I ended up seeing myself coaching and seeing this definition of technically minded professional, what stood out for me is breaking things into pieces, right? And the problem solving. Most technical people, as a matter of fact, I was coaching somebody last week who's VP, and he said, my mind is set to come into a situation and solve problems. So looking at this definition, what I found out is that it transferred actually to other different kinds of jobs. What kinds of jobs are there? Physicians. I coach doctors. What are doctors doing? When you walk in, they're solving a problem and they break things down. Now they ask you like, okay, what are the symptoms, right? So I noticed that doctors are somehow technically minded. The other profession that I was seeing that were sort of technically minded were scientists. They too break things down into pieces and focus on the problems. The other ones that I also saw had the same kind of, you could use the same definitions, were people who were in the accounting world, right? They look at the numbers, they break it down, and they just solve the problems. So I want to make sure when I say technically minded that we're not looking at just the engineers, but the whole slew of professions that somehow or another think the same way. So why influence? Why is it important to influence? I actually stole this picture here from Bonnie Marcus, who was doing a presentation, and I liked it so much I stole it from her. So I just want to make sure that I give her credit for this. The whole thing is when we think about influence, we think about a one-on-one situation, especially when we're looking at like who is our manager and then who is the manager's manager, or who is our direct contact in the consulting, and I'm influencing on that person. The scenario on the left, on my left, is that you could be influencing different people who have no connection whatsoever with each other. So as consultants, you could be influencing all these different people who might not even interact with each other. Now, the other side here is influencing people and who have connections with other people. And so it gets much more complicated when you're working with maybe 2 or 3 different organizations in one company, and you're influencing or consulting. And by the way, I just this morning at 8 o'clock or 8:30 this morning was working with a VP who is also part of an organization and a company that I work with different of the VPs. So I know there's some connection there, and my ability to be able to say, well, this is what's going on there, and this is how it was going in here, and to be able to influence with much more of that perspective is important as well. So I'm just curious, if you look at the hypothetical A or hypothetical or B, which one do you see yourself in? Which situation would you see yourself most? And you can unmute.
So I guess I'll just suggest I try and see B. To me, it's the difference between kind of a first-person shooter and a third-person shooter. And if you can cultivate B, you can see more of the system that you're enmeshed in, right? You have a chance of seeing more of the second-order effects, but it's sometimes quite hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So true. And also how you influence that one person will also matter, and how you influence the others.
And definitely with the chat, most people are B. Jim is A.
Okay.
Because his current company has 2 people plus him in it.
Okay. So you could see that that's an A. Yeah. And so there's a lot of people in the B scenario. Yeah. So influence becomes much more complicated in also in the B scenario. And if working with companies, it's not unusual for them, even when you go in as a consultant to propose something, that they're needing to connect with other people before they say yes, right? I'm gonna, this morning's call was about one person, but I had to speak to 3 different people in 3 different roles in relationship to that one person that I'm going to be coaching before I could come up with their coaching goals, because I had to get I had to be able to see what all the other ones were also wanting out of this one person. So, which is not too many coaches do that. They do a one-on-one situation, but I always tell my clients that I coach a system, not just one person. So, so thank you for sharing that. Let me go back here. So when we influence, something to think about, there are different styles of communication and influence. And as I explain this to you, I want you to think about either which style am I, or which style have I communicated with or working with, which company or person in this company style is. So one is a director. This is someone who is very assertive and task oriented. Now, in my experience, a lot of people in like higher level positions show more assertiveness, and task oriented is an interesting one, because these are what I see in the technical world is people are very reactive, okay, because they're solving problems. So a lot of times when I work with these folks, I have to help them sometimes pull back and take a look at the big picture, because the first thing they want to do is solve that problem. So I have to ask bigger picture questions before I just go in and jump in and say, okay, let me solve this problem for you. Okay. The analyzer is very cautious. And I've come across some of the technical folks who are very cautious before they take tasks. In other words, they have almost like a mental checklist before they actually maybe might engage with you. So know that they probably will need more information and will ask you to break things down for them, or ask you for more data before they make a decision. So when you're influencing them, know that. The visionary is assertive, but the relationship oriented. so looking at the bigger picture and looking at the relationships, like when I had that call this morning, I was working with a gentleman who that person was reporting to directly. However, he brought in a new person to talk to me because he said this other person was actually going to take over the management of this one person I was going to be working with. So very much cautious about, I don't want to not include someone. I want to make sure I include someone. The visionary also likes to look at the bigger picture, and we call it zooming out. They want to know, zoom out before they zoom in. Like, how does this affect the entire company? What is the future of this? How does this go? How will this work out 10 years from now or 5 years from now? So know that about them. The fourth is the supporter. Oh, by the way, both the visionary and the supporter, they will look to you also to build relationship as well. So this is where small talk comes in before you start coming in as a consultant and selling your services or whatever it might be. I was telling you I work with scientists, and I had one scientist I was working with. She is Russian, and one of the things that she was struggling with was working here in the United States, employees coming into her office and just chatting. And she said, like, okay, what do they want, right? And one of the things that I had to make her aware of is that these people were probably the kinds of people that needed the relationship, building the relationship. So I shared with her what small talk was, and she said she'd never heard of small talk. And like, how are you today? What's going on? Oh, I heard I heard this about you, that you just moved into a new home, or you got married, or whatever it is, right? And I said it builds a relationship before you go into business. And she had practiced that, and she was gaining trust from her employees. And she went back to, she's Russian, and they don't believe, they're very much into get things done and being assertive. So when she went back to Russia, she actually said, her father was also a businessman, and she said, I'm going to teach you small talk. Let's go to a meeting together. Just, and I'll show you what small talk was like. So there was a new thing for that. The supporter, again, very much, I like the analyzer, cautious, but relationship building. Okay. And this one is the one who's going to say, yeah, so that sounds great. And it seems like they're going your way. But be aware that sometimes the supporter will have your back as much as they can. But if they had to choose between you and their internal group, they're probably going to choose their internal group. So that's when influencing becomes more of a cobweb to you, I mean, not cobwebs, but a spider web to you, where you would probably have to take a look and look at who else am I supposed to influence. So I'm just curious, if you looked at the director, the analyzer, the visionary, the supporter, where do you feel your influence or communication style is like? I'm going to go back here.
Well, it's funny, when I'm working with a customer, I place myself as a 3, but when I'm working with my team and they need to get something done, I look at myself as a 1. So it varies. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Brian, because good influencers know how to flex. And we'll go into a scenario here pretty soon. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
Number of people have typed into the chat, Angel. It's kind of all over the map. 3s, 1s, analyzer, 4, director, 2 and 3. Skip from 1 to 2, sometimes 3.
Yeah.
So it's quite a bit going on there.
Yeah. And knowing your own style is important because just as Brian had shared, he flexes, right? So know that your clients might have a different style as you do, and how do you mirror their style is one to think about. You know, what shows up for you. If they're shaking your hand and they're saying, okay, so let's talk business, and very much directly the director style, how do you go into that mode as well with them? Okay, so maybe building relationship will come later on as well. So know that about, you know, analyzer. I was talking to one executive who was telling me that he's got a person who's an analyzer, shows a lot of information, and when presenting, gets the audience, the people who are in the, you know, people either selling to or consulting with, get overwhelmed. It's too much information. So be aware that, you know, if you're not sure on how much information they need, is to ask them, you know, how much do they need? And sometimes short and sweet is good, and then you can expound a little bit more later on. So this article came up, and it is, you know, the Harvard Business Review, which I get. This is probably one of the how do you call that, the series or issue that I kept, because this was about Steve Jobs, and it said the article that Adam Grant had written was Persuading the Unpersuadable. And it was interesting to hear that that's supposed to be Steve Jobs, and how everybody was was having a real challenge in you know, in influencing Steve Jobs. And this article was written in actually in March, April 2021. What's interesting is this is, I pulled from the article. It says, for years, Jobs insisted he would never make a phone. He was a computer guy, right? Laptops and that sort of thing. And his team finally persuaded him to reconsider. He banned outside apps. It took another year to get him to reverse that stance. Within 9 months, the App Store had 1 billion downloads, and a decade later, the iPhone had generated more than 1 trillion in revenue. Now, they were saying, you know, people say the genius of Steve Jobs. In this article, he says there are geniuses behind Steve Jobs who learn how to influence him, right? So I want you to think about that. You know, have you come across a Steve Jobs who probably will push back? And at the end of this time we have together, I will actually share with you what Adam had suggested when you are face to face with somebody like a Steve Jobs, that you have to influence, some things to think about. We talked about Steve Jobs, but we're going to move into a more strategic approach. Remember when I said, like, when I work with technical minded folks, they like me to break things down, right? So because they like the pieces before they can understand the big picture. So this is the big picture around influence. And one of the things to think about before you influence is your goal. What are you trying to achieve? And how can I present my goal? This is when you need to start thinking about who you're presenting to. My suggestion to you too, other than looking them up and looking at them at LinkedIn, is if you know anybody who knows them, is to connect with those people and ask, what do you know about this person? And how have they shown up in working with this person, if you get a chance. Usually that first meeting isn't a good way to figure that out. But be very clear about what you're there for. What is it that you, at the end of the day, What do you want to have that person do or say? Okay, so be clear about that. Next is understand your own mindset. How are you? How are you thinking about the situation? And any kind of assumptions that you may make about the situation. So you might have done some research, but there could be some things you don't know. And so what I would say to you is, if there's anything about mindset, is really, I always tell my clients, I actually do the hat thing. I said, take your J hat out, judging, like, okay, this is what's I know this person's this way and that way, or this company's this way, and put your C hat on and be very curious. Come in with a mindset of curiosity. And before you start assuming anything about the person as well. Okay. The next one is, what do you know, again, about the other person? Reflect on what might be going on for them. You know, a lot of times we go in already with an agenda, but spend time asking questions about what they see as success. At the end of the day, you know, you want all of these things happening. What's the most important thing for you? And to have that laser goal. And sometimes it's really interesting because I have a style called double clicking, which I took from Judith Blazer's book, Conversational Intelligence. By the way, I suggest you all get the book. And a lot of times people will tell you that they want something, but they won't give you what's the story behind that. Okay, so double clicking on, you know, for example, this is a real challenge going on right now in our company. Double click on the word challenge. So what does challenge mean?
So Angel, I want to stir in a question from Brian Martin. I think it's appropriate here.
Okay.
He says, I often find myself working with customers who seem to be part of a dysfunctional organization. How do you influence when a customer is moving in a direction that is contrary to their interests?
You know, which is an interesting question. And the question I guess I have around the question is, how do you know it's dysfunctional? And how do you, when you say moving against their interests, what does that mean? So what am I doing right now? I'm double clicking on the words he used, right?
Mhm.
Because those are very general terms. How dysfunction? What is it that you're seeing as a dysfunction?
You know, I'm thinking of a particular client in a governmental organization, and they clearly have you know, political power above them that makes them very cautious, let's say. But sometimes that caution is so disruptive to achieving something that it can be very frustrating, and it takes so much time to create those relationships, maybe a couple of years. By the time you got the relationships established, the contract's over. So I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about when I talk about this dysfunction. It's just so hard to create relationships when people actually are afraid of the relationships because of the kind of organization they're in and the kind of risks that they're facing. So it can be very challenging in my experience.
Yeah. And, you know, and I don't know this is possible for you, but if it's possible for you, even because it sounds like they're being careful not to rock the boat on the top. Is that correct?
I would say that's a pretty good characterization.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not unusual, especially, are they in a leadership role?
Nope.
Okay. And they will not be.
Never.
Because if you know, I do 360s for leaders, and that is the protectionism, like I'm protecting myself and all that, is usually not the quality kind of person that becomes a leader, right? So if they're not able to maybe present, or ask them if you can have permission to meet with those people as well. So that way they get a chance to listen to you personally, and then you can see what's the pushback. And it's not unusual for me to call like executive meetings, like, can I meet with your executives and with you, and let's uncover this together as well. So if you can do that, that would be great. I'm sure you can, but you know, would they be open to doing it? Also knowing when to step out for you yourself. You know, are you digging a hole that leads to nowhere? Or sometimes, you know, I've given up clients who I feel just there's no, it's not going to lead to anything, right? So also know when to say to yourself, this is a waste of my time, right? So be able to do that as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, I posed a very, I think, difficult question. These are, I don't know, existential questions that they may not actually have an answer. Obviously, these are frustrations that I've worked with over the last few years, and do my best to get in and around, but I don't know if there is a direct way to challenge it, because you can't always go over people's heads. It's just not in the cards. So
yeah, no, it's not, and that's why asking permission is important for you. I wouldn't go over their heads either. You know, asking them if they're open to it is a good thing. Also, knowing that they're protecting themselves in some ways is trying to get them to share with you what has that person done that it has worked, you know, because we always fall back into what has not worked, but what has worked with executives. What are some of the things that they realize? Yeah, they'll say yes if this, or what are their criteria? Getting them to understand that as well.
So, Angel, we had a follow-up from Elias that was, and so you talked about trying to get over them. Elias's question was, to Brian's point, if it takes a long time to build relationships, can you make some suggestions for how to become more efficient or effective at building these relationships?
Yeah. One of the things is, I would say that, you know, when you look at the relationships, it's really around building trust. Okay. And you probably would be able to tell right away in your working with that person. I said there's a trustometer. Some people start out with no trust. So the way you build relationship with that person is in many ways is investing not only in time, but also in delivering. So if they can trust that you're listening to them and that you're spending time listening to them, and also you deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Okay. Because if that happens, when you start to lose trust and you start losing relationship, getting to know them. I'm coaching some people right now who are in the how would I go in the world of they're attorneys, right? But when I look them up, I'm going like, oh wow, this person actually is an opera singer at the same time. And getting to understand that and bringing to the table like, hey, I found this about you. It just brings out a whole different part of them that builds relationship. So don't hesitate to do small talk with them as well before you start. I would say a minute of small talk before you, at least a minute. Okay, and it's amazing how fast a minute could go. But just getting to understand, how are you today? What's going on for you? And, you know, hey, I heard this is happening outside. How's this impacting your organization? Just, you know, be a little bit more curious with them. This one here, that second bullet really applies more to people who are internal, but it doesn't mean that when you're looking at organization, I think this goes back to the question about how to when you're working with someone who's working for a dysfunctional organization, how do you work that out, right? And a lot of times I bring the mirror up. I say, here's what I'm experiencing. Tell me how this is working for you. I spent like I just did an email that to 2-level executives and 2 managers underneath. Here's what I'm experiencing about this project we're working with. And here's the realities of what's happening. Maybe we should think about it in a different way. So also being able to do that, to zoom out. If you're a company and you have had other people that, you know, I as part of Women in Consulting, we have a relationship with Office Depot. I had a really not good experience with the first Office Depot person who was given to us. And, you know, when they came in, they said, don't worry, I'm not going to be doing the same thing that other person did. Knowing the history behind that made me much more open. He knowing the history that we had challenges made me much more open to working with him as well. So you see that yin and yang in the middle there, the push-pull, and I'm not going to go too much into detail with you, but this is really when I work with folks, I actually spend time getting to understand the way they influence today and getting them. There's no good or bad. It's the reason for the yin and yang is it balances off each other and how you use it. So the push behaviors, many times consultants come in with, you know, the whole idea of suggesting things. They're very much into telling people or asserting themselves or suggesting. Not that it's wrong, providing rationale. Here's why you should do this. And then if you don't do it this way, this is what's going to happen. Now, these are not saying, I'm not saying these are bad things. These are just one way. There is other ways of influencing, and you can do a mixture of both push and what we call, they say using push behaviors when you know what you want, have good reasons, and believe you need to take a more direct approach. You know, so know when to use the push behaviors when they're ready with it. If you're not in a relationship yet or haven't built a really good relationship with them, it might be too soon for you to go in and be much more direct with them. Usually I get to this point when I've built relationship or rapport with my clients as well. And they know that it's coming from a good place. I don't come in and say, I'm the expert. I come in and say, you know, I'm curious on what's going on. And then I will say, here's what I'm sensing. Okay, here's what I would like to suggest. Pull behaviors. This is where we are asking more questions, asking open-ended questions, asking focused questions, asking open questions. So tell me what's going on in your organization. Asking focused questions. So what would it take you to actually start doing this? Summarizing. So here's what I heard. Here's what I heard you need. And disclosing. You know, what I'm hearing you saying is that you would like this to happen, but I'm also like to be open with you that I see that this might be a challenge in trying to achieve that. You know, it might be that you don't have the buy-in yet. So how do we get that buy-in? So use the pull behavior. So you want to build a relationship with the other person, need the commitment, involvement from them, and require additional information to help achieve their goals. So asking more questions to actually get to know, double clicking, like I just did with that question, is what do you do with this? And double clicking on the words and seeing what's behind that is really important, because you might be surprised. There's always what I call a wish behind the complaint. Like, this is not happening for our organization, or this is what's going on. And then, you know, what's the wish behind that complaint? What do they really want at the end of the day? You might get a totally different response. Any questions before we go forward?
I thought you modeled something there very effectively, Angel, which is that we often want to jump in and, like Brian's question, you want to jump in and answer it right away, right? It's like we're trained from like high school to the fast answer is the one, right? And instead you actually clarified first. So I thought that was a key takeaway for me from today.
Yeah, double clicking. You know, it's like when you're on your computer and there's a blue thing with a line in it and you double click, it just brings up a whole bunch of new information, right? So do that as well. This is from Judith Glaser's Conversational Intelligence, and she talks about level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1, and I would really suggest getting the book, but you know, I always tell my tech folks, you can get the audio, but get the book, because she is a scientist at heart, and so she thinks a scientific way, and you know, technical is another way I could see it. She breaks things down. So level 1 is an exchange in information. I'm asking you, but I'm telling you. So I ask to tell, okay? And the blind spot there is tell, sell, and yell. And it might not sound like yelling, but I'm telling you, you should do this. Here's the reason why. And let me tell you again. So if you're focusing on what you know and not taking the time to get more information. Level 2 is exchanging. So you're asking questions, but you're listening to them at the same time, but you're looking at whether or not you have to defend what you know. So you're like having a checklist in the brain. Are they telling me what I already know or what I need to tell them? So there's an answer in your head, and you're just asking the question to see if you know, it says addicted to being right, that you can jump in and sort of sell yourself. The third is asking questions you have no answers for. You're really in discovery, and you're creating a big space for them to give you information you might not know about. So this is about what you don't know. It's the blind spot there is all talk and no action. So you gather all information, but you don't do anything with it, right? So be aware of that when you're influencing, is that there's some expectation, if you want to spend time there, that you're going to do something with this information as well. So how would you influence Steve Jobs? In this article, there's a story here about, you know, Steve Jobs. I don't know if you heard it, and I've heard this through the grapevine, where Steve Jobs was unhappy about, he came in and he had the iPhone in his pocket with his car keys. And when he came in to work, he called all these executives and he threw the iPhone on the table and he said, "Look at this phone, it's full of scratches, right? And I want us to do something about this." Well, he reached out to the CEO of Corning, whose name is Wendell Weeks. So he went to Wendell Weeks, and you know, who is now doing the glass, who does glass for the iPhone. But at that time, he told Wendell that he wanted to meet with him because he had this problem with the glass of the iPhone, and he wanted to see if he could come up with a solution. And Wendell said, "You know, I'm not sure we're the right company for you. So let me talk to your techie guys and let me understand what they're needing before I make a commitment." I mean, he was the CEO of Corning, and he could have said, "Yeah, let me do it," but he said, "You know, let me find out more." Steve Jobs' response is, "I'm technical enough. You can talk to me." So Steve Jobs, so he said, "Okay." So instead of saying, "Well, this is what I think," he said, "Tell me what you are thinking. Tell me what you have in mind." And Steve Jobs was trying to tell him what he had in mind, and he realized Steve Jobs had no idea about glass. So instead of telling Steve, "You don't know what you're talking about," which I believe has been told to Steve before, he said, "You know, Steve, let me give you some information about glass." So he educated him. He stepped back and basically gave him a little class about glass. And at that point, Steve Jobs realized what he didn't know. And he did end up working with Corning, and Corning now is actually the provider of the glass. So the things Adam Grant came up when you're meeting with somebody like Steve Jobs is really quite interesting, because he says, ask him to explain ask him to explain how things work. Because this is, instead of saying, this is how you should do it, find out where the gap is between how they think things should work and how it should work, right? So asking them to explain, how do you see it working? How do you see it happening? Okay. By the way, they these Yale students, and they ask them to explain, smart, intelligent students, and how does a television, transmit all the stuff that they do in television. And they thought they knew it all, and they found out they didn't. There was a lot of things they didn't know. So asking sometimes just helps to define what you feel is the gap that you need to fill. Let him know, stubborn person. Let him seize the reins. Sometimes getting them to chat and talk and open up, and think what they're thinking, kind of helps them to realize that you're listening to them, and that you value also their ideas and their opinions. Find a way to praise him. There was an incident where Steve Jobs was presenting, and somebody actually challenged Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs says, it's those kinds of people, when you're coming up with something new, who will always challenge it. And he was very good about responding nicely to that person who challenged him. Why? Because that person started out saying, Steve, you're a smart, smart person, giving him a lot of kudos before he said, I don't think you know what you're talking about. But he gave him a lot of kudos before he did that. Disagree with him, disagreeable, if you are willing to fight for your ideas. They actually did one time at Apple, they actually gave an award to someone who was able to disagree with Steve Jobs, and actually gave him a very major position in the company. And one of the things there's a lot of stories that I've read about CEOs who said that they wish they had listened to the people who disagreed with them at times. So this might be a little bit, much more aggressive, but they say, usually leaders are chosen. The leaders that are chosen are the ones that can push back as well. So I want to end with this, and I want to end with just stop sharing and ask if there's any questions here for the last 8 minutes we have. Any other question?
Could you give the name of the book again that you showed the table from, Angel? I've read it, but I can't remember the name.
Yeah, let me put it. Let me put it in the chat. It's Conversational Intelligence.
Perfect.
And it's by Judith Blaser. Judith actually just passed away 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer, but I used to listen to her a lot, and just an incredible person about how to work with folks using some of her approaches. The double clicking is her approach, how to hold meetings, how to get engaged, different things about different levels of communication as well.
What is TYVM, Jim?
Thank you very much.
Oh, perfect.
I like that. I'll use that, TYVM.
TYVM. All right. Well, Angel, I want to thank you for taking part today. It was quite educational, and we'll make a copy of this recording available if you want to watch it again. And I think we're going to break here.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed giving this presentation. And remember one thing, though, in order to influence, you have to be influenced. It's a two-way street. So be aware of that and just be open to that as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel.
Very much.
All right.
Thank you, Angel, and thank you, Sean, for organizing the event.
Bye-bye.